in addition to being a psychologist, I have a 5th degree black belt in a Korean martial art called Hapkido. So that became a very, big piece of my life. I had focus, and I got confidence. I got a yellow belt and a blue belt and a red belt and a black belt.
Previously on Resilience in Action.
So we would have conversations about what does it mean to feel alienated. And when I disclosed my abuse, he was there for me. He didn't say, get some grit or, this. He just said, let's talk about it.
From Prospera Labs, this is Resilience in Action, the story of how to unpack the ultimate superpower when it comes to adapting to a fast-changing environment. The story of how to bounce back stronger and stay away from digging yourself into a deeper hole. A story told from multiple perspectives, one angle at a time and over the course of this season. I am Gabriela Enrique. We are at episode 2. You probably heard episode 1 because you received an email from me or through our website at prosperalabs.org. Or maybe you came across it on social media. But if you haven't, stop. Go back to the beginning. We are telling this story in order, the story of how to unlock the power of resilience. So, to pick up where we left off, in the first episode, you heard about the importance of becoming an emotion scientist. We learned about the power of becoming curious explorers of our own and others' emotions so that they can help us achieve our goals and improve our lives. We also learned that managing anxiety starts with accepting both the feeling and the fact that current conditions are real and significant. We learned that we can always remind ourselves about how we survived other major hardships, and we can do it again as we move forward. In the coming episodes, we will be moving like lightning. We are putting together the bits and pieces of evidence about resilience. We are uncovering a far more complex story behind this, especially when it comes to using resilience in action. The number of strategies is limitless, ranging from cognitive strategies like positive self-talk to better routines. Sleep, good nutrition, and exercise are also important because they support a healthy immune system and makes us more likely to respond to difficult emotions in helpful ways. Big shocker, I know. Nothing really new here. By the end of this episode, you will have a better sense of how to use resilience in action. You will start to accumulate powerful tools under your belt as you navigate the current environment and discover the what and how to move forward. To get a solid grounding of what resilience is, let's take another look at the scientific angle. The one I like the most, the evidence-based one. The angle that looks at the root cause of the challenges we face. Dr. Leah Weiss is a researcher, Stanford Business School lecturer, and co-founder of Skylight. She is a principal teacher and founding faculty member of Stanford's Compassion Cultivation Program, conceived by the Dalai Lama. Her first book, How We Work, Live Your Purpose, Reclaim Your Sanity, and Embrace the Daily Grind, has been covered by news outlets around the world, including BBC, the New York Times, TED, the Financial Times, Harvard Business Review, and she has also consulted and trained in 85 organizations around the world. I asked Leah to give us more texture and specifics around resilience. I was also very curious to hear how she came about to be the rock star she is. From one social scientist to another, let me tell you this woman is solid. Let's hear what she has to say.
I think of resilience as our ability to respond and be adaptive in our lives. And it's comprised of a number of different skill sets. I also think it's really important when we're talking about resilience to not just focus on the individual, because so many of the key elements have to do with the teams we work in, the families we live in, the communities that we're a part of, and the broader culture. So a lot of my work is focused on recently, in particular, around team resilience and what does that look like.
How do you embed the personal aspect with the collective aspect of it?
So I think it's important for us to realize that we each have our own strengths and weaknesses, challenges, personalities. But when we work together with others, the interpersonal elements of how we can support or undermine one another is critical for the unit of functioning of how resilient are we as a group. I think even at the team level, one of the foundations we need to be attentive to is self-awareness. So we have to understand our triggers, what motivates us, what our purpose is. And we also need to understand how that's impacting how we show up to and treat others, including the kinds of unconscious bias that we might be bringing into interactions. Also critical is to think in terms of community. How are we fostering connection, psychological safety? And then there's a critical piece about autonomy. Do we have the right level of support, but freedom to act? And that can be very difficult to find that sweet spot, or maybe that sweet spot changes depending on what's happening. So for people who are leaders of teams, this is critical. We want to make sure people feel supported but not micromanaged, because when they do, that really precipitates burnout. And then I think, the other critical part to resilience is being thoughtful about rest, about pause, about rejuvenation or replenishing ourselves. And when we bring those elements together, we can have really a robust approach to resilience, both as an individual and as a collective, a family unit, a working unit, and so forth.
It seems like we've been very attached as a society to the hero, and to the hero narrative, and to the very simplistic black or white type of way of managing ourselves and our lives. Can you, even with the team, right? Either you work well with the team or not.
Yes.
If you don't, then you're gone. And it seems that we could be potentially at the risk of losing a lot of collective intelligence if we engage in that. I wonder if you can share with us a few examples, or an example that comes to mind, both with your work or what you've seen around of how does effective resilience look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think your point about heroism is really apt when we think interpersonally. And this comes up, I think, both with resilience and also I often teach on the topic of compassion, and it can come up there as well. I think, an example that came to mind when you mentioned that the small exchanges that we have with each other. Actually, we've built a prototype for a tool to help people train for these small interactions of the type we might experience every day. So maybe a colleague we're working on a project with sends us a text and says, I'm really overwhelmed. Maybe it's homeschool, maybe it's caring for a parent. I'm not going to be able to hit the deliverable in the timeline and to the quality that I'd want. What should we do here? I want to flag this for you and get your input. So if we're the person receiving this, have a choice point there. And there's a fake imperative that we might think that being compassionate in this area or being resilient might mean saying, great, just, thanks for flagging it, send it over to me. I'll do it. I'll fix it. I'll be the hero. When there's often the opportunity to ask that person, what do you need for support, right? We can say, well, I don't have flexibility on the timing, but maybe the graphics don't have to be as high priority for this first rev. But before we even get to that, is there anything I can do to support you emotionally, or are you being blocked in some aspect of the project that would help you to talk through? And often if we can, that person can be supported to problem solve and encouraged, right, to put forward a path that makes sense to them, they can keep the autonomy and they can keep the work going forward and feel like they were being treated not just with dignity, but in a way that is not swooping in to save the day, but helping them grow and develop. And so I think in a time like this, we don't want to jump to, for those of us who are like, okay, there's a challenge here, I'm just going to stay up till midnight and do it myself, which many high-performing people would have that reflex, that actually that doesn't create the resilient team. That doesn't, not only is that bad for you individually, but you're not learning to be a true leader in the sense of supporting other people through their problems so that they can develop and the team itself can thrive. And if you swoop in and you save the day and you take the project over, you can do that in a way that will long-term also undermine your relationship and create dysfunction in your team. So I think these small choice points that we train ourselves in, and that means the self-awareness to know, I'm frustrated. I wanted this project to be done, perfectly and on time, manage my own frustration and not let that limit the kind of creative approach we can take to solving a problem, and also recognizing the importance of this relationship. So that's an example that comes to mind.
That's a beautiful one. You're bringing up many important and yet hard concepts to wrap ourselves around. So I would like to get your views on what do you think prevents leaders from staying resilient themselves and just engaging into building the systems for teams and communities to just be more resilient. And I'd like to just use myself as an example. I'm a perfectionist. I have a very hard time with compassion. I'm working on that, and I really tend to just I guess make the textbook mistakes of either taking over or just challenging the person or assuming that they don't care enough, that I'm all alone, and that those things just make things worse.
Yeah, I think, the self-awareness you're displaying, I think, is a really important
Thank you.
component. I mean, for both, for you and for listeners, this piece of knowing I have a proclivity, especially when I'm under stress, all of our kind of wonky behaviors get stronger, and who's not under immense stress right now. So, it's one of the reasons we developed this resilience quiz short version of our longer, kind of more academically robust resilience diagnostic, to help people just get a quick sense of what motivates me, how do I cope, and not just for the self-awareness, but to share with our team. So we can say, if you and I were colleagues working together day in and day out, after you say something like that, then that opens up a whole conversation. Okay, so how can I support you? Right? Knowing that the more stressed you are, the more likely you will be to work around the clock and try to do all the things yourself. And that will probably have diminishing returns at some point for our collective work, and certainly for you personally. So do you want me to call you out if I see you sending me emails at 9 p.m. and 5 a.m.? Do you want me to say, hey, are you okay? What's going on? Right? Is that, of course, one night we might work late on a project, but if that's the pattern, right? If we set the stage for having the discussion about what our coping strategies are, where we go in times of stress, and make collective agreements. I mean, there's basic ones that we could make around, we're not going to email each other between 6 p.m. and 8 a.m., presuming we're all in the same time zones, which of course many organizations are not. But just to make a hypothetical, we're going to have good email hygiene, and we're doing that not just for our individual sanity, but so we don't get into an arms race of working around the clock and all of us driving ourselves into the ground.
I appreciate your appreciation of my self-awareness, Leah. Thank you. But this was, unfortunately, this was a very hard lesson to learn. I had to go through, many personal difficulties with my personal relationship, even in my health. It had a very big impact. I went through cancer and then an autoimmune condition. I had to go through struggles with sleep, a lot of frustration, lots of anxieties. But I'm really wondering and the anxiety part, for instance, I've been going through that throughout my life. I'm wondering if, given your experience, is there a way for leaders? Because right now we do need leaders at their best. Yeah. Even though it's challenging, is there a way for leaders to learn these lessons and what you've observed and the tools you've developed without having to go through the pain I guess me and other people have gone through? And I guess I'm on my 4th layer of burnout.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think, part of the answer to that is normalizing the conversation about how we struggle, and for high achieving individuals. I mean, it's very common when I teach at the Stanford Business School and have for many years now. Students struggle. Many students are struggling with severe anxiety, right? It's one of the mechanisms that got them to be so awesome at whatever it is they did, that they got into Stanford Business School, which is impossible to get into. So in a way, it's something that people are pained by. In another way, it's part of their success and they're afraid to give it up. In my mind, when I'm teaching in a group, I mean, people always write about it in papers, but when we hit a point as a class, or when I'm working in an organization where people can talk openly about some of these challenges, I know we've made a massive stride, because the shame on top of, the struggle is only making everything worse. And I think we have to take seriously building into our lives, just like we know we need to be thoughtful about movement and nutrition, and we have to have customized approaches to these, because one person's keto diet and the other person's intermittent fasting and the other person's high carb, I don't know what, and nobody's doing that these days, but they don't work for each other, different body types and mindsets. We also need to think that way about putting in tools, strategies, and community around our mental resilience. And I think there's a lot of conversation around things like mindfulness, a lot of good data. I also think we need to broaden out beyond meditation, because there's many people, I'm sure, who are listening.
I appreciate that so much. Thank you. It's not a cure-all.
It's not, and it doesn't, or mindfulness might be something everybody can build in, but not in the same way, not through meditation, or maybe, or yoga. Maybe there's so that's been a big part of my work, of thinking in terms of mindset, thinking in terms of diversity of resources, and helping people find the thing that's natural for them, that they're intrinsically motivated to do. That's not another long thing on our to-do list alongside the workout I didn't take, the diet I didn't follow, and the meditation I'm not doing, the Calm app I'm not using, which all these apps are in great, the data on them says one thing really clearly: they don't work. Because people sign up for them, and few and far between is someone who can stick with it. We need real community around mental resilience. And that means the people we live with, the people we work with, finding ways, if we're part of a religious community, then for those listeners who are, the power of having a community. For those of us who are not part of a religious community, we need to find other ways to find that connection and support around these habits. We have to replicate that and take that part seriously. So find something you love, not something you feel like you have to do. Start really small, all the good tenets of behavior change. And, better to do the 15-minute walk 5 days a week than pretend you're going to run a marathon and never put on your shoes.
So I'm wondering if you can share a little bit of the misconceptions we have.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the key ones we need to debunk is let's take a topic of burnout, that if we are really struggling in our work environment and we're showing the signs of emotional exhaustion, dehumanization or disconnection from others, and we feel like we can't have an impact on our environment, there is a misnomer that we should be able to yoga or meditate our way out of that as an individual. Whereas, if you look at the research, or if you listen to people who are preeminent in understanding how burnout takes shape in individuals, it's fundamentally a person and environment issue that can't be solved only at the individual level. In the metaphor that Dr. Maslow, who is like the godmother of burnout research, uses, she says, trying to blame an individual for their own burnout is like looking at the pickles in a vinegar barrel. It's looking at the cucumbers in a vinegar barrel. Let me say that again, because it's an important quote. Blaming an individual for their own burnout is like looking at the pickles in the vinegar barrel and blaming them for becoming cucumbers. It just fundamentally makes no sense. Anybody in this environment would turn into a pickle. And of course, some of us will get burned out faster than others in particular environments. And the way I always talk about this when I have the ear of leadership, I do a lot of work with networks of CEOs. And I will say, if you miss the opportunity to understand the environmental causes of any of your employees who get burned out, you are missing the canary in the coal mine, because the same toxicity is there for everybody and you have to learn from it. So I think the individual misnomer is thinking you can yoga or meditate your way out of it. It's not just an individual wellness initiative. The group level, we need to understand it's not individuals who can't hack it because they're weak, that there's an environmental context that needs to be understood. And you see this increasingly in organizations that take seriously employee experience and whatnot, that they're trying to put this lens to the workplace. And then I think as a society, there's, big questions we need to deal with of conflating more time working with more productivity, norming against not taking vacations, not needing rest. Like the military knows that you don't just deploy around the clock. You have pre-deployment, deployment, and post-deployment. And the private sector needs to understand that people can't push at 120% all the time and be effective. It's just not a reasonable expectation. And that also means all these kind of myths of the badge of honor of how busy I am and how I had to work all night and all weekend, that those aren't badges of honor, that those are actually indicators that we're in an environment that's dysfunctional. If it's the day in and day out, of course, there's occasionally going to be a sprint in a project we have to really bust it on. But if that's your norm, if that's your week into month into year experience, that's a failure of sustainable, humanized work engagement.
So this is what I'm starting to get from these conversations. It seems that developing our resilience muscles is complex, nuanced, and requires constant practice. Let's take this opportunity to narrow down some resources that can help you today, based on the conversation with Leah. 1. Move past self-criticism and negative self-talk. Though being critical towards ourselves may feel right when things go wrong, it's often the result of old scripts we've learned in childhood, from parents, teachers, and other adults in our lives. While they seem like they could motivate us to do better, nothing could be further from the truth. Negative self-talk doesn't help us and can actually make things worse. 2. Research suggests that self-criticism predicts depression, avoidance behaviors, loss of self-esteem, negative perfectionism, procrastination, and rumination. Ultimately, self-criticism compromises our goals and undermines our pursuits. 3. Your brain is your temple, and you get to choose who and what gets in. Many of you would agree with these strategies, and sometimes the bigger question is how to make that happen. Here is one easy first step and a good place to start. We are facilitating a new kind of program, Purpose in Action, which is like putting your own oxygen mask and getting a compass. This free program will provide a surge of energy and clarity to lead through a tumultuous season. It is designed to help leaders refocus, reorient, reconnect, build inner resilience and purpose for the challenging days yet to come. You will have the opportunity to build fellowships with other leaders doing their best to meet this moment with strength, grace, and authenticity. You will leave with greater awareness of the personal habits and strategies to be the leader you want to be. Learn more at prosperalabs.org/purpose in action. Coming up next on Resilience in Action. Now, you are probably thinking that not everyone has the stomach or the patience to go through papers and statistical evidence about clinical trials. I get it. However, in a world plagued with fake news, we really need to pay attention and stay away from snake oil. Or, in other words, we need to make sure we stay away from those that say, I can give you resilience, come touch my muscles. So, Maybe there's an in-between hardcore science and overly simplistic recipes based on random opinion. I think I found the right person with. It's somebody that is on the day-to-day trenches of moving forward. Somebody that has been deeply involved responding to both the global pandemic and very active redesigning the systems we need in order to get the higher education to build the future we want. More next episode. Resilience in Action is produced by Paulina Ramos, Julie Chavez, and me. Emily Cohen is our production and operations manager. Maureen Villaseñor is our editorial advisor. Editing help from Nancy Fuentes. Fact-checking by Karina Fregoso. Our theme music is composed by Nick Sandler, scoring music by Nick and by Mark Villanueva, who also mixed our programs. Our website, where you can listen to all our episodes of this season, ask questions, and sign up to get updates from our work, prosperalabs.org. Resilience in Action is a production of Prospera Labs, accelerating leadership across the globe. Thanks for listening. Until next time.